Inscryption is unlike any game. Hidden lore in most games consists of torn pages, terminals, and exhaustive dialogue with NPCs that you couldn't give less of a shit about.
Lead the way!
And Inscryption is a card game. What kind of card games have lore? No, but seriously, how can a card game about non-anthropomorphic forest animals have lore? See, the thing is, Inscryption is a game within a game within a game. And in order to understand it all, you need to play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other games. Grab some popcorn, cause this is gonna be interesting. The Steam page for Inscryption describes it as an inky black, card-based odyssey that blends deck-building roguelike, escape room-style puzzles, and psychological horror into a blood-laced smoothie. The second you open Inscryption, it's clear that something is off. We see closed captions and hear someone say,
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
with a bit of shuffling going on in the background. Amateur audio is not something you expect to hear within the first 10 seconds of a game. Another oddity is that there is no option to start a new game. The only option is the continue button. But I just installed the game. The game begins and we meet this strange figure. He will be our dungeon master for now, and we get a small taste of that impeccable sound design. Now at this point, it seems that whoever this man is was in some sort of hibernation, and when we press continue, it awoke him. This is supported by the statement, "It has been ages." The strange man opposing us then gives us a brief introduction to this card game. I'll save you the painstaking explanation of the convoluted rules and just give you the basics. See, each card has a blood cost which determines the number of sacrifices needed to play it. You can sacrifice nearly any card, including your useful side deck of no-cost squirrels. The higher the cost, the better the card. That is, until you build an ultra-powerful deck that has no cost at all and is literally unkillable. The number on the left is the attack power of the card, and the number on the right is its health. The goal is to deal enough damage to your opponent until the scale tips over to 6 damage. Standalone, this card game is incredibly well made, and extremely fun and challenging, but contrary to what the Steam page may lead you to believe, this is only about 15% of the actual game. But for now, let's pretend we don't know that. While going through the tutorial fight, one of the cards, the Stoat, speaks for a brief moment as we go to sacrifice him. Oh, and yeah, I should note that sacrificing cards means they're just gone for that battle. They will almost always return to our deck. After beating the tutorial fight with our sharp wit and 5-head Among Us brain, the ominous man rolls out a map. For now, there is only one path to follow. Along the way, we get to pick up various cards and combine their attributes, which the game calls sigils. As we begin the next battle and draw our top deck, the Stoat says to us,
"You sacrificed me? While I was sleeping? It was the right play. I get it. Maybe you'll help me. Play along for now."
This Stoat card will continue to talk to us throughout the run, and he seems to know a lot more than he's letting on. After building our deck a little more and tackling another battle, the Stoat says this to us.
"There's a way out. For both of us. Somewhere in this foul cabin."
And during this game, we get to test out one of the more direct methods of increasing our score with one of the items we collected earlier. See, the scales are balanced with golden teeth, and, well, the pliers allow us to use a not-so-pretty tooth. This is one of the many visceral aspects of the card game. While we do not know how or why we are here, clearly the stakes are high enough for our character to rip his own teeth out just to get one extra point in this card game. This is the first major clue that something very sinister is going on here. Even the Dungeon Master himself is surprised. But with that desperate attempt to win the battle, we're still overpowered by a battalion of sparrows and a powerful grizzly. Our side of the scale bottoms out, and the Dungeon Master tells us to get up and fetch a candlestick. We back away from the table and move around the claustrophobic room with a point-and-click style of control. Looking around, we find several objects scattered about. A cuckoo clock, a vestibule, a painting of the table itself, a safe, some other random props that will have more importance later, and a door with an almost rhythmic flashing coming from the other side. Almost like Morse code. No. We'll get to that later. Stay focused. Placing the candle on the table, the Dungeon Master makes it very clear that we only get 2 lives. And if we make another mistake, he will sacrifice us. Interesting choice of words. Making it a little further, we encounter the first boss, the Prospector, who turns our cards to gold. And with very little trouble, we defeat him and get access to our first rare card. Ooh, shiny. The obvious choice here is Child 13. We breeze through the next section and make it to the next boss, the Angler, who this time steals our cards with his giant hook. After defeating his first stage, this happens. Too fast, too soon. The text is in red, unlike the Dungeon Master's orange text. So it's unlikely that this was him talking. Blocking our way is an impenetrable wall of flying grizzlies. And while technically it's possible to defeat them, it takes a very good deck and a hell of a lot of RNG. We do our best to win, but ultimately, we are powerless. At this point, we are brought into what is presumably the other side of the locked door that we saw earlier. The Dungeon Master then has us create a death card, where we choose all the best attributes of the various cards from our deck, and are given the chance to name it. And the man raises a camera, and
why did you do that? Why would you do that to me when you know how I feel about that? Why?
In an instant, we're back at the table, but the Dungeon Master says another challenger. So we are now playing as someone different. He then immediately introduces us to Bones, another mechanic which allows us to play certain types of bone cost-based cards. Obviously, every time a card dies, we get a bone, which we can spend later. The complexity will continue to grow as the game continues, as will the difficulty. One funny little detail is how every time the stoat is placed or sacrificed, he has some sassy dialogue. Eventually, the Dungeon Master asks us to get up and to get our figurine from beside the safe. And as we approach, we can hear and see it rattling. While we're up, we look around a bit more. We find some gold teeth lodged in the skull, we snuff a candle out, and this time the painting of the table is replaced with a specific board position. If we were to replace the exact position shown in the painting, we would unlock one of the many secrets hidden in this room. Underneath a hammer and staff-looking thing, we find the rulebook, which is a collection of explanations for all of the sigils that the cards can possess. Luckily, we find a 3-digit combination on the very first page, which we immediately turn back with to use on the safe. Inside, we find another talking card, the Stink Bug.
Oh, hello. I wasn't sure if I would ever escape that iron crypt. Is the stoat around? The stunted wolf? This madness must end.
The Stink Bug mentions the stoat, and also the stunted wolf. Perhaps another talking card. The Dungeon Master abruptly ends our conversation, and we grab a key that was hidden behind the Stink Bug. Using this key, we can open the cabinet, which contains 4 puzzles that we'll come back to later. We sit back down, and our newly acquired Stink Bug begins to have a chat with the stoat.
You again?
Our friend freed me.
Well, I basically told them how to do it. You got a plan?
We have another friend here.
You've got to be... I wouldn't call him a friend, but I suppose we are in deep this time.
The other friend the stoat is talking about is likely the stunted wolf, but for now, we'll have to press on without him. Surprisingly, during one of the battles, the Dungeon Master surrenders, realizing how boned he is. We decline to surrender and commit a war crime. After the outright slaughter for the Dungeon Master, he tells us to get up and stretch our legs.
Do not ask about the old data. Subscribe.
He tells us to get up and stretch our legs a bit, so he can plan the next encounter. As we do so, we power through all the puzzles, and grab two very important items: a carved squirrel head and a caged wolf. This squirrel head will allow us to buff our side deck and become insanely overpowered. Returning to the table and entering a battle, the stink bug has this comment.
So strange. Why can't I remember his name? I believe I lost some of my memory in the flash.
And it's likely that the stink bug is talking about the man across from us. As we draw the stoat again, he says,
Look, there's a third talking card somewhere around here. Personally, I hate the guy. Biggest killjoy ever. But he's the only one of us with a plan to get things back to normal.
The third talking card has a plan to bring things back to normal. But what does that even mean? What is normal in this world? While battling the prospector for a second time, the stink bug gives a hint, saying how the caged wolf has a hidden meaning, and that it was locked up for a reason. So obviously, we play that card, and after a few turns, a coyote brings its health to 0, which replaces it with a normal wolf card. But we also hear a strange click. After beating the prospector, we look around to see what's changed, and, well, this caged wolf figurine has been freed. Grabbing it, we place it next to the squirrel, which releases its clutch of the dagger. We grab it, and yeah, I know what you're probably thinking, but no, we will not be trying to attack the Dungeon Master with it. His comment on it is telling enough of its horrific purpose. Sitting back down, we go to continue the game, and as we reach a card selection point, we see a death card for somebody named Casey. Now, this may seem insignificant, but it will be very relevant soon. So remember, Casey death card. With the help of both of our death cards, we are able to defeat the angler this time. Thankfully, there were no bear shenanigans. On our journey to the next boss, we encounter a strange location, where we are able to sacrifice one of our cards to the Bone Lord. This grants us a boon. While this doesn't seem to be anything important, the significance of the Bone Lord will become more apparent as the story progresses. We make our way to the third boss, and this is where, arguably, the best music in the game starts playing. Unsurprisingly, after beating the first phase, we're hit with another flying grizzly wall. Too fast, too soon. After being dragged into the back room, we find the Dungeon Master's camera laying on the ground next to us. We grab it and frantically try to use it, but there's no film. He grabs it out of our hands, and we accept our fate. On our third run, we are dealt our starting deck, which includes the stoat and the stink bug, but they are starting to look a bit different. The stink bug now has lips and a human nose, and the stoat has a more square head with an angry expression, and while strange, neither of them seem to acknowledge it. On this run, we finally get access to the woodcarver, who will give us statues that apply a sigil to a specific breed of card, depending on the head that we put on it. We make some fledgling squirrels, which is pretty useless, but will become powerful soon. After just a couple battles, we meet the woodcarver and find a base that gives our squirrels 3 blood, which means we can play 90% of the cards in this game with just 1 squirrel. Pretty OP. Getting to the prospector fight, curiosity gets the best of me, and I try to see what the knife does. Oh, shit. Well, at least we won. The Dungeon Master slides us a box full of, eyeballs, and this one looks cool. Whoa, that's new. The Dungeon Master seems unaware of our special eye, and we immediately bolt over to the cuckoo clock. We align our hands, and there it is. The final talking card.
Take the film roll before he sees it. Now.
He tells us to grab the film roll, which we do. Sitting back down, we move to get some items, and we see this strange bottle of green goop. And, well, of course, we take it. On our way to the next boss, we begin to build the most powerful deck yet. And in our next encounter, we attempt to use this strange green bottle, and the Dungeon Master just puts it off to the side. After winning the battle, we stand up and go to interact with the green bottle again, which is sentient. He says that we have the Master's Eye. The end must be close now if Magnificus is free. Whoever this Magnificus is sounds pretty important. Making it deeper into the map, there is another interaction between the stoat and the stunted wolf.
I ought to thank you. How has it been?
It has been quite bad. I'm trapped in the body of a stoat and the paper of a card.
I see that. And I have a course set up a way to reset once more.
Go on.
Our player friend here, they already hold the key.
We can see that the stoat's head is, turning into a TV. Hey, that's my completely original idea. The stoat said how he is trapped in the body of a stoat in the paper of a card, which is, pretty obvious. The stunted wolf then states how he has a way to reset it again, and that we have the key, presumably the film roll. We defeat the angler and meet one of the Dungeon Master's characters, the mycologists, conjoined twins who will splice duplicate cards together for us, making something very powerful. Beginning the next battle, the stinkbug says,
So you found the stunted wolf. I've seen this play out enough times to know that a plan is in motion. Make haste.
This statement will be very significant later on, but for now, all we know is that this isn't the first time this series of events has happened. After an intense battle with the Trapper, we proceed to the final map of the game, and we're given a few final choices to pad out our deck before our battle. As our figurine enters the dimly lit cabin, the lights shut off one by one, and we're transported to the same place as our figurine. Approaching the cabin, a massive hand reaches down from above, implying that we are now viewing this from the perspective of our figurine. And this is the hand of the Dungeon Master. On the table are several trials, which are just testing if you have enough cards with certain sigils. If you do, you'll receive a boon, a powerful ability just for the final battle. Oh, 2 actually. Hell yeah, I did. As we approach the cabin, we see the Dungeon Master's massive figure peering over the top, and as we enter, he looks a little different from how I remember him earlier. He lights a 3rd candle, meaning he now has 3 phases. And we proceed with the battle. The various masks of the character he played rotate around him, and each turn he will take on one of their abilities and the associated mask. After beating the first phase pretty easily, the Dungeon Master explains how, quote, shadowy figures betrayed you. And one of the cards that he begins to play is none other than Casey. Again, her importance will be revealed later. With the help of our completely overpowered wolf card, we absolutely melt the 2nd phase before he even has a chance to attack us. And that's when Leshy turns around and takes a picture of the moon. Now, for some reason, all I could think of here was Gru trying to steal the moon in Despicable Me. But, yeah. Anyway, he places the moon card on the table, and to be honest, it's pretty weak. It's more a matter of if you have enough cards left over from the last 2 phases. And considering that we've only used 1 card this entire time, we managed to defeat it. No sweat. We finish the Dungeon Master off, and a camera software opens up. There's a bunch of footage of a great value MatPat, and he appears to be a
Card gamer?
YouTuber under the name Luke the Lucky Carter. The first few videos are him opening cards. And eventually, he mentions that he found a pack of Inscryption cards that he got from a garage sale. He tells us that it's a pretty old game, and he mentions that one of the packs appears to have been resealed. When he opens it, he finds a card with a set of coordinates on it, and he hilariously says,
49 degrees north, 123 degrees west. I think I'd have to check, but I think that's pretty nearby.
This is absolutely mind-boggling to me. What kind of person knows the coordinates of where they live off the top of their head? But besides that, in the next video, we see Luke making his way to the coordinates. And on his very first dig, he finds something. Okay, sure. Alright, I need to stop questioning the realism here. He reaches in and finds a floppy disk with Inscryption written across it. The next video we find is a week later, and he says a familiar line.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
We have come full circle, seeing everything that has led up to this, and Luke starting the game, we exit the strange camera UI and see a massive pile of meat laying in front of us. We clearly are not very appetized by our prize, so the Dungeon Master brings us to the back room to execute us, just like the rest. Our only prize for winning was the strange pile of meat. No freedom. Except, we have a little trick up our sleeves, and hand the Dungeon Master the old Uno reverse. Across from us, we can see his death card plastered against the wall. And in the corner is a pile of bodies of all of the previous challengers. Glowing brightly in the center of the room is the new game button. We take it and return to the menu. And now we can start a new game. Now, for those of you who have played Inscryption before, this may be a bit jarring. On December 3rd, 2018, 3 years before the release of Inscryption, Daniel Mullins, the creator of the game, released Sacrifices Must Be Made for the Ludum Dare Game Jam. For the uninitiated, a game jam is a competition where developers make a short game in a relatively small window of time, typically a few days to 2 weeks. And Daniel's submission scored second overall, and it looked something like this. Right off the bat, we see a familiar figure, the Dungeon Master, with slightly wonkier eyes. The rules and setup are the exact same, although lacking in some areas. The visuals are unmistakable. The stoat is... Whoa. What's wrong with the stoat? Some of the Dungeon Master's lines are identical, like, "In honorable death, play the stoat." Interestingly, the art for the squirrel never changed. Same for the Warren. The entire game is limited to about a collection of 10 cards, and there's no map or card customization. And every time you play, you're given the same choice of cards to pick from. The Dungeon Master starts off the game by saying, "You look terrible. When did you last eat?" After winning the first hand, the Dungeon Master says, "I will remind you of my promise. If you win the final round, I will feed you. And you told me you were the only survivor of the crash. If that's true, then who is that behind you?" We learn after this hand that a child is standing behind us. After beating the third and final hand, we get to choose our menu, and we have a choice between the starving man and a hungry child. And of course, we choose the starving man, which is ourselves. The Dungeon Master says, "How noble," and the game closes. Going back through the game a second time to choose the other option for the ending, we get into a bad situation, and the Dungeon Master offers us a knife to tip the scales. The same way it's done in Inscryption, except he offers it to us again on the final hand, and instead of our eye, we cut off our hand. Another thing I found that was pretty peculiar was that if you sacrificed a Warren for the stoat, it would turn into a bloated stoat.
Will you shut the hell up?
This time around, we choose the child, and the Dungeon Master says, "Very well. Let's eat." And the game closes. Now, clearly this was the original inspiration for Inscryption, but it's more than that. It's canon. Hidden deep within the code of the game is a key element for solving a much larger mystery. But that's for later. We start a new game and lines of code scroll across the screen. And after that, we watch a pixelated cinematic describing how the world did not know cards. Oh, also, this is the same globe from the cabin, as you can see from the skeleton hand and other key features. There are 4 scribes, 2 of which look awfully familiar. They created cards with their own method of inscription. Now, also note that this is not how you spell inscription. In this version, it's spelt like crypt, which is like a tomb. Anyway, their methods were a quill, a camera, a particle scanner, and a brush. And one day, a challenger, us, arrived to replace a scribe. And, okay, What the fuck? We're now playing a 2D JRPG style game? I'm getting flashbacks to the Nameless game.
What is this?
So, somehow, starting a new game has brought us to essentially an entirely new world with a completely different style. We were given the choice of 4 different starting decks, each having a correlation to one of the scribes. The starting deck that we choose also marks which scribes we'll be replacing. For my own sanity, I chose Leshy, the Scribe of the Beasts, as a starting deck. This is also who we will decide to replace. The other choices are Grimora, the Scribe of the Dead, P03, the Scribe of Technology, and Magnificus, the Scribe of Magics. Also, we finally learned the name of the Game Master's name, Leshy. In Slavic mythology, Leshy is the name of the deity of forests and hunting, and that makes sense. Leshy is the scribe of the beasts of the forest, and even in Sacrifices Must Be Made, he states, "You dare lie to me? In my forest?" We pick Leshy's starting deck because the cards are the ones we're most familiar with. And honestly, fuck that guy. As we leave the starting area, we hear Luke again.
What is this?
We are in some sort of map area, and in each corner is an area that represents each one of the scribes. Leshy's cabin, Grimora's crypt, Magnificus's tower, and P03's factory. Moving up to Leshy's cabin, we can see the angler on the left, the prospector on the right, and inside, Leshy himself. Strangely, Leshy doesn't seem aware of anything that has transpired over the last 30 minutes. And, oh yeah, he's alive. He hands us a replica camera and tasks us with taking a photo of each of his subordinates. Scattered across the map are various card packs that we can use to build and boost our deck, some of which we can find here in Leshy's cabin. In the back of the cabin, we also find the Trapper, who in this section of the game is a merchant. One interesting thing about this section is that you can build your deck however you want, and you can mix and match the cards from different scribes. But the trade-off is that you can't build extremely powerful cards like we were able to in the last section. One of the most challenging and frustrating things from the last act was having cards in your deck that didn't synergize, and being unable to remove them. But now we can pick and choose as we please. After defeating the prospector, we head past him, where we take a photo of the bait, hang it, and capture a photo of the shark. We head to the left side and do the same with the angler, and move into this field, where we place the trap to kill this, rabbit? I mean, that looks an awful lot like a dog. Anyway, we take a photo of the pelt and make our way to the Trapper. His battle is certainly the most difficult thus far, however, we still manage to defeat him after a few failed attempts. The overall vibe of this section is much more whimsical. Even Leshy's dialogue seems more friendly and lighthearted. We proceed to body Leshy in our first attempt, and after defeating him, P03 enters the cabin. And at this point, there's no question that P03 was the Stoat. Knowing this, it becomes clear that the stink bug was Grimora, and the stunted wolf was Magnificus. But P03 seems to be aware of how he was trapped in the card, even stating,
I'm done being your stinking pet.
But Leshy has given us no indication that he's aware of anything. He just seems to be an NPC in this strange version of the game.
No.
Heading to a small dock near Leshy's cabin, we find the angler sitting alone. When we speak to him, he tells us, "Sometimes I try this spot. Find good fish, corrupted fish, old fish. I catch old fish last time, beat Dredger, beat Goo, beat Casey." Again, this Casey is brought up. Clearly, there is something significant about her, but at this point, we don't know why. The angler also referred to old fish in all caps with an underscore. This is similar to snake case in programming, but kind of reversed because it's all capitalized. It's a naming convention for files and scripts, and throughout the game we'll find various other uses of the capitalized snake case, so keep an eye out for that. Moving down to the bridge, we find this strange green person, who, barks?
What the f?
There's this extremely meta moment where they say, "Full disclosure, it'll take me exactly as long to fix this bridge as it will for you to defeat one of the scribes." Moving down to Grimora, we battle these 3 skeletons, each of which have a unique headstone describing their cause of death. And we need to piece together who died when and how. The first one is Sawyer, with the middle stone. The second is Royal, who occupied the rightmost tomb. And finally, Casey Hobbs. Interestingly, her death is quite recent compared to the other skeletons. 1970 to 1992. Only 22 years old. Before completing the headstone puzzle, we walk down a set of stairs, where we find a casket with a strange horned creature inside, asking for an offering. Without having what it needs, we press on. We align the pieces of the tombstones and approach Grimora. After losing several times, we head to the trapper to purchase some more cards, and we find these 2 pieces of a broken obol. I wonder. After many attempts, we were able to defeat Grimora. She tells us, "There will be an opportunity for you to change your mind, and I beg that you spare me." After she hands us a card pack, the camera dies. Because remember, everything we're seeing right now is a recording from Luke. And it boots back up into this Camworks menu. The first video shows Luke sending an email regarding the Inscryption game that he found. And interestingly, he is using what looks to be Windows 7, and the monitor that he's using looks to be from the early 2010s, so it's likely that this is taking place during that period. Although he could just be using older hardware and prefers Windows 7 based, but for now, this is just speculation. The monitor is very similar to the beautifully named ViewSonic VX250W LED. I spent way too much time trying to find that, but that released in 2011, which confirms my suspicion. In the second video, Luke asks his audience if they've ever played or heard of the Inscryption video game, and he notes how he's been filming himself play it. At the end of the video, he says,
What the fuck is the car?
which when converted from binary to ASCII, gives us Karnoffel code. According to Wikipedia, Karnoffel is the oldest identifiable known card game. Clearly the overlap of the card game is here, but that's about it. For now. In the next video, Luke reads the response email from the game company, now identified as Game Funa, and they threaten legal action if he doesn't return the game, and his response is measured.
What the fuck?
The next clip shows a woman approaching Luke's door.
I think this woman's actually from Game Funa. She came to my door yesterday, and I didn't answer. This time I'm gonna record it.
An employee from Game Funa. She questions him, asking him about the Inscryption game that he came into possession of, and she's extremely passive-aggressive.
I've seen your videos.
Oh.
Luke also questions how she got his address, and she responds with,
My boss gave me your address.
It's also so funny that each of these videos ended in Luke saying, "The fuck?" The final video shows Luke trying to record a video, and he has a breakdown. Relatable. Making it back to the game, we head over to this new location, a mushroom hut, and inside, the mycologists. This time, they have a specific request, 2 Gravedigger cards, which thankfully we have. We hand it over and they combine it into a Spore Digger, which is followed with another request, this time for field mice. With the bridge finally repaired, we make our way across to Magnificus's tower, and in the first room, we find a monocle, which when we wear it, gives us the same secret vision from the eyeball in the cabin. In the top left of the same room, we find a secret area, and inside is an ID card? Yeah, we'll come back to this one later. I know I've said this a lot thus far, but trust me, it's worth it. And coming soon. Using the monocle, we solve the puzzle in the room, which teleports us to a weird space area with our familiar friend. The same thing from the cabin, anyway. He tells us how he desperately wants to win this battle so he can be a part of his master's deck. But we show him no mercy. We have a scribe to dethrone. On the second floor is a training dummy, where we can play without any opposition. And using this, we're able to play both of the obols together, which makes this happen. Which gives us an ancient obol, something that has no apparent use. I also spent a completely unnecessary amount of time building up this bone heap to do over 120 damage. Enough damage to kill him 16 times over. At least I won't have to worry about foils for a while. Though yeah, that's the currency for the traders. Heading back to Grimoire's crypt, we see if that obol will be a worthy sacrifice for the horde creature in the casket, seeing as it has no other use. And it turns out, it is. We head down a long staircase, and at the bottom...
What the fuck is this?
Oh, thanks, Luke. We find the Bone Lord. Walking up towards the head of the skeleton covered in ragged clothing, we see a strange collection of cards in his pocket. And he speaks of the old data. He tells us not to approach him unless we will worship him and the old data. Out of pure curiosity, we approach him again. And this time he says, "You may not understand its meaning, not even I do fully, but you appreciate its power. The old data does not take, and it does not give. But I do. Please accept my meager offering." Below him is a key and a very overpowered card. Heading back to the mycologists, we give them the field mice, which they combine, and afterwards, they have another request. Sentry bots. We beeline it to P03's factory and grab 2 of them. With this final combination complete... Oh. Okay, one more. Now, with this final combination complete, they say something very interesting.
Yes, I do believe we have found a clue with this one. For the code. Yes, but best we not speak of it.
K code. Sounds an awful lot like the Carnathal code. Somehow these cards have helped the mycologists find a clue. But for now, they keep it to themselves. They give us a reward, which is another strange 3-dimensional key that looks nearly identical to the one the Bone Lord gave us earlier. With our newly acquired spore cards, we head back into Magnificus's tower and solve the next puzzle by using the sigils from the dummy's cards. We then meet another one of his pupils. They tell us being ahead on a pike is how they will be able to make it into Magnificus's deck. Apparently, his pupils are subjected to extreme torture just to get this highest honor. After defeating them, we move on to the next floor. And the answer for this puzzle is actually in the pause menu. And this is where we meet my favorite one of his pupils. We defeat him with little trouble, and he says,
"That was incredibly stimulating. We aren't done here, right? I wish to see the light again, to sing, to dance. You wouldn't leave me, would you?"
Now, this is pretty sad. And while there's nothing we can do about it right now, don't worry, we will come back for him. Making it to the very top of the tower with Magnificus, we can see that sparkly stuff scattered around the tower. And in fact, it's from his paintbrush. As we go to begin the battle with him, we see a very familiar looking eye. He even states how it aches. We begin the battle, and after a few attempts and some deck changes, we defeat him. And he says,
"My eye? It aches because it remembers it was excised by none other than Leshy, the scribe of the beast, and the beast he is. Arrogant, single-minded, obsessed with gaining power. But he is far from the worst scribe to become hegemon. You see, the ejection of my eyeball is far from the worst thing that can happen around here. You must be especially aware of.
And he disappears. We find a note on a nearby table that reads,
Dear Scamora, I believe PO3's plot may go far past the extent of common power grab. Indeed, this great transcendence will have catastrophic and unpredictable results. I urge you to consider.
And it's cut off. At this point, we can gather that P03 is the major antagonist. He has some sort of evil plan known as the Great Transcendence. In the room nearby is a water trough, and inside a small tentacle, which gives us this cute, weak-looking card. Might be useful later. Before heading to P03's factory for the final challenge, we backtrack and do a bit of investigating, and unsurprisingly, we find two secrets hidden in Leshy's area. On the left side, where we got the pelt, there is a small bit of Magnificus's paint, seemingly leading to nowhere. Following the hidden path, we find the wood carver, the same one from the previous section, whittling away. Speaking to her, she tells us how
few players visit me here. I sometimes ponder what my gameplay purpose was. Oh, it's clear now that you wish to know more. What can I tell you? I have glimpsed the old data. I will speak nothing of it, as a kindness. To know it is to die. But you players are never deterred by that. What can I tell you? It is corrupt knowledge, so evil that it corrupted the disc.
Now, there are two very important things to break down here. One is that she referred to us as the player. And two is that she is now the third character to speak of the old data. She goes into detail about how the old data is evil and even has the power to kill. On the other side of the cabin is another secret area, and in here is a photo of a woman, although you're unable to make out any of the distinctive features of her face. We then make our final journey down to P03's factory, and he's standing right in the center of the entranceway. As we go to talk to him, he tells us that our deck is not strong enough to battle him, and to come back. He also asks us,
get those workers to send me something good. Tell them to throw themselves on the line if necessary.
Following his instructions, we head deep into the factory, solving a couple of puzzles to make our way to his employees. We easily defeat him, and he says, I am proud to have served P03 faithfully. Well met, stranger. He then throws himself onto the production line, and we make our way further into the factory. Completing another puzzle, we speak with the smelter. And we notice that strangely, before he was able to speak his line, it looks like just for a single frame or two, he was saying something else. Going back in post, we're able to see that he says in red text, let me out, help me, no, no, no. And he even says, I. These two lines of dialogue seem to contradict each other directly. He also throws himself onto the production line. We then make it to the final employee, and he is quite literally too busy to even duel us. And after beating him, it seems that he fishes up something very strange. Whatever it is appears to be glitching between all of the different PNG assets in the game. We backtrack to P03 and start our interesting battle with him. Each of the scribes had their own gimmick in the boss fight. Leshy would make death cards, Grimoire would revive your cards as a useless waste, Magnificus painted sigils onto them, and P03 has a rotating board, which to me is the most fun, but really we didn't get enough time to play with it. With our extremely overpowered deck, we beat him with very little trouble, and the final pillar lights. P03 is rather stoic about his loss, and we depart. At the pillars, we have one last opportunity to choose who we will replace, and we stick with our initial choice, Leshy, Leshy appears before us and says, "For you have no idea what could have been. A carefully curated cycle of life and death, excitement, terror, mystery. That gormless angler has once again failed me. I suspect I know which scribe bested me." At that very moment, P03 appears, and as the screen glitches, Leshy vanishes. P03 then directly says,
"Filthy old beast. I'll never be your stoat again."
This gives us complete confirmation that he remembers what happened at the beginning of the game. P03 then starts another game with us, and he plays a glitchy black card, which when we attack, causes the entire game to begin to corrupt and distort. And suddenly, we're back into the 3D world, and instead of Leshy, P03 is sitting directly across from us. He presents something similar to Leshy's map, except we now have freedom of movement and the ability to go back. In a very phoned-in way, he explains how this place is named Botopia, and it is ruled by 4 Uber bots, who we must beat to escape, and to perform the Great Transcendence. Trying to stand up, we can see that we're cuffed to the table. This is in stark contrast to Leshy letting us walk around freely, even encouraging us to do so. He is so uncertain with the plot and rules of his version of the game that he has to continuously remind us how much better it is. The rules for the battle contain all of P03's cards from the previous section, and instead of 4 lanes, we now have 5. Yet again, this is a desperate attempt from P03 to make his version of the game better. Now, most players, like my friend Boofcan, would agree that this rule set is inferior to that of Leshy's, but this is obviously subjective. While the base gameplay is subpar, intentionally, some of the gimmicks in this section are among the best the game has to offer. Anytime we win a battle without dying, we gain a wanted status, which increases with every victory. This will cause bounty hunters to randomly appear, which increasingly raise in difficulty depending on our wanted level. One thing that actually makes this section a lot more interesting than Leshy's game are the hidden areas scattered throughout the map. If you hover your cursor over a spot where there wouldn't normally be an arrow, one may appear. And we can find anything from shortcuts to money and even these pelts. For now, they have no apparent use, but we'll come back to these later. Another interesting rule change is that if you die, you can easily respawn at one of the 5 checkpoints scattered across the map, lowering the stakes of each battle. Also, instead of teeth or foils, the currency is Robux. I mean Robobucks. How original. With our new deck in hand, we head out in search of the Uberbots. The battles are significantly more difficult, but the cards feel unoriginal and a lot less creative than those from Leshy. Making it to the first checkpoint, the power suddenly cuts, and P03 finally lets us stand in order to grab a new battery. Looking around, we can see that the factory is identical to that from the previous section, the same way Leshy's cabin was. We find 2 puzzles in the corner, and in the other room, a box containing a Fishbot card. Clearly the angler. There is also a very familiar clock hung on the wall, and P03 even comments on it, saying,
"The other scribe's junk sometimes glitches in here."
We grab the power cell and return to the table to continue our game. Throughout our various encounters, we will hear Luke make small comments, like when a card that has permadeath is killed.
Damn it.
If we look at the map, we can see that it is the exact same one from the previous section, with Leshy's cabin, Grimoire's crypt, etc. all in the same position. Also, little editor's note, I just noticed that Grimoire's crypt is on top of a skeleton hand, and guess what's in her basement? Yeah, the Bone Lord. Anyway, making it to the first boss, which is where Leshy's cabin would be, is the photographer. Yeah, pretty on the nose there with that one, P03. We can even find the prospector on our way there. The boss is comically easy because its whole gimmick allows you to return to any board state at the start of your turn, which lets us do this. In fact, it's so easy that it makes me believe that P03 did this intentionally. Obviously, he hates Leshy, so why would he make his representation of him good at this all-important game? With the first Uberbot defeated, we press on to the next. We get a small upgrade to our side deck, and as we move away, something pops up, saying memory full, and we return to the camwork screen. The very first video we see is from the 2nd of October. This is the earliest recording thus far, and this makes sense after watching it. This is recorded right after Luke got a killer deal on 4 Inscryption card packs.
You know what that is? You know what that is? Vintage packs of Inscryption. 4 of them. I don't know if the woman knew what these are worth. I mean, I felt a little bad buying them off of her. But I mean, she's probably doing okay living in this part of town. I mean, it's like...
Immediately after, we see Luke on the phone with a Mrs. Hobbs. Apparently, she is the one who he purchased the cards from. He asks where she got them, and she says that they are from her daughter.
Your daughters?
Casey.
Her name was Casey?
But she's unable to talk about it further. Casey Hobbs. Where have we seen that name before?
Sorry, what? She worked for Game Funa?
The next video shows Luke discovering that Casey died in a fire while working late for her employer, Game Funa. Interestingly, the article refers to her as a developer, but the headline for the article says, Fire something computer storage facility. Why would a developer be at a computer storage facility? The next video's audio is corrupted, and we see 3 noteworthy things in this scene. The sticky up here says mirror and roar rim. Mirror backwards. Stickies on the bottom show pig 3K pig. And the webpage he's on is the Wikipedia for the Carnaval game. Hey, wait! That's what I was doing earlier. The final video shows Luke late at night, saying,
Fuck this. My phone's in the other room, so if I die before I can call 911, use this tape as evidence.
There are 2 more videos here. Normally, the error videos are just noise and static. But this time, we see a video of Luke laughing in a creepily hysterical way. And in the other one, this strange note. Mycologist 22, perhaps blood letterbox? This is just nonsense, besides that little mycologist bit, but in due time, this will be one of the most important pieces of information in the game. Getting back up from the table, we take another look around, and things have changed again. We find the skull from Leshy's cabin, as well as a box with a familiar rhythmic flashing. Completing the puzzle, we find our friend from earlier, stimulated as ever. This is your brain on TikTok. We also find Goobert, in slightly less torment, who mentions how the master is near. Sitting back down at the table and making our way over to Grimora's area, we get the ability to gemify cards. Also, something to note here is the various bounty hunters we encounter along the way, typically having these punny names, but there's actually a chance to get a Casey one, although I never got one personally. There's a shop in this area where we can spend our foils, and we buy this paintbrush, which reveals 4 o'clock written on the floor. This is pretty obvious, but... oh shit. The stats for the Ouroboros stayed from the last section? Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned, every time you sacrifice the Ouroboros, its health and power increase by 1. And, I kind of abused this mechanic. With this ultra-powerful card, we head towards the next Uberbot, the unfinished boss. We paint him a face, and we're forced to decide a rule. all of these combinations really suck for us, so we pick the lesser evil and play our hand. After defeating the first stage, we're forced to pick yet another rule, and somehow we're able to defeat him on our first try. Skill issue, buddy. With no other route to take, we head back to Filthy Corpse Land and return to the locked room. Now, I was stupid enough to not even try this lock, thinking I didn't have the key. But then I remembered this.
Yes! Hell yeah!
We enter the room and come face to face with the Bone Lord once again. He tells us, "I have meditated deeply on the old data. I will impart my insights, but you mustn't record them." The screen cuts to black, and after what feels like a lifetime, it returns. And Luke says,
What the fuck, man?
in a very shaky voice, whatever he saw must have really freaked him out. And this isn't just some editing trick, this is what the game does. It goes straight to black. Headed to the next boss, we sign the contract and enter the arena. And this is where things start to get very meta. The Archivist. Clearly a parallel to Grimoire's Inscryption of Deaths, and also because of the fact that you need a quill to sign a contract to enter. And oh boy, is this one awesome. It actually scans your entire file system and makes you pick a file. The larger the file, the more damage it does. Thankfully, I have hundreds of gigabytes worth of Inscryption videos to pick from, so it's pretty trivial. But then the boss has a strange request. Pick a file, quote, dearest to our heart, and one that shows age. Since I have a basically brand new computer, the oldest file I had was this VHS video. But the thing is, after we choose the file, the boss tells us that they will actually delete it from our PC if the card dies. Wait, this... okay, shit. Alright. Rest in peace. VHS, pause, green screen. Fuck, I can't do this. In retaliation, we play the Ouroboros and absolutely body them. With only one boss left... oh. What's this? Oh. Another boss? Somehow, the mycologists hacked into P03. Their gimmick is combining cards on the board, obviously. After beating them, they combine 2 more cards and say,
It appears to be a fragment of the old data. We must study it. The robot must forget.
The card's name is a seemingly random assortment of numbers, and it's actually pretty strong. Making it to the top left of the map, the Resplendent Bastion, the only area with a name that doesn't have a negative connotation, we are able to make our own cards from scratch. And this is probably my favorite thing about this section. You even get to name it something like Big Fat 2000. And this actually has another use. In P03's room is the image of a card with very specific sigils. And after making that exact card, we see that the sign now has a sigil with 3 strange dots next to it. And, okay, I'm gonna be completely honest here. There was absolutely no way for me to find out what this was without looking it up. So what you have to do is spin this camera thing at the exact right moment, click to the back of it to reveal a sigil on this rock. The last sigil is in the clock. If we input the time 11, a little note pops out. Now, this number actually comes from the table when we were picking our boons. Really cool to see how something from the beginning of the game loops back like that. With all of these sigils, we can interact with this pole of sigils. Oh, it's the same one from Magnificus's tower. When we do so, we are transported to some strange realm, where we see Gubert, or Gubis. I forget his name. On the other side is a painting of Gubert with Magnificus, holding him in a warm embrace. And this is just so sweet. Although it's probably an extreme case of Stockholm Syndrome, you can't deny that it's pretty cute. He keeps saying, "You hate it," and
and that's why you won't look at it again.
We look at it again, and he says,
Oh, joy. You liked it. I'll show it to the master. Thank you, friend.
We leave and head back to the table for our final battle. Now, while we were fighting, a door opened in the factory, which leads to the Trapper. He doesn't offer any cards, but instead, lore. Now, we'll come back to this later, as context is really needed for any of this to make sense. We sit back down and enter the virtual representation of the factory, and the boss stands right in front of us, but it's offline. To turn it on, we need to activate these 4 radar dishes and the one hidden behind 3 separate battles in the back of the factory. After aligning the last dish, we go to fight the final boss. What's interesting is that P03 says it's his least favorite boss, even though it's the one that represents himself. Golly is now connected to the internet, and she begins making my Steam friends her cards. Okay. After beating the first phase, we get a card from another player. What the fuck is that? Okay, I got trolled, but I still managed to win because I'm just that guy. And after winning, we are tasked with creating a card ourselves for another player. And for us to win, they need to win their hand with our card. And since I'm not an asshole, I made a godly card for whoever was lucky enough to be blessed with it. And after a short wait, they obviously won. As we leave the factory, P03 mentions that the cameras in one of the rooms has shut off, and he asks that we go investigate. As we head into the back of the factory, there are a few CAPTCHAs that we complete, all of which allude to P03's insecure arrogance, and on the final terminal, there is a checkbox saying, "I'm not a robot." And as we check it, the floor below us begins to descend, where we then arrive in a dark room with the other 3 scribes. Apparently, they have put their differences aside, and they plan on using us as a distraction, so they can strike and stop the Great Transcendence. Leshy says, "Make P03 feel joy again, so that I may snuff it out." We then return to the main floor of the factory and sit back down at the game table. As we make our long journey back towards the beginning of the map, P03 begins to reminisce with us over our time together, even saying he enjoyed it. As we reach the end, he says,
"You prepared the Great Transcendence for me, without even knowing what it is."
When suddenly, his face cuts to a live feed of Luke. He then says,
"You finished making the game? You gave me access to your hard drive? You took screenshots for the store page, and you connected me to the internet to upload it all."
Every single boss that we faced and each of their gimmicks were purely designed so that he could create and publish his game through us, the Great Transcendence. He gloats, saying how stupid we are, and how, in his version of Inscryption, he will be the one in charge. He begins to upload the game, but right before he can finish, after extinguishing P03, Leshy and Magnificus hand us the new game card, saying that we can now reset the game and fix this whole mess. But before we even have the opportunity, Grimora grabs a folder.
Oh, what's this? Complete file access.
As she browses through the files, we see her go past the old data. She navigates to the root directory of the floppy and begins to delete everything. Grimora has essentially set off a bomb. This will end the lives of all of the scribes. Leshy and Magnificus exclaim their shock, and Grimora tells them,
"It's for the best, my dears. Soon you will see this as a freedom. Freedom from our endless quarrel. Freedom from our suffering. All of us aside, there are things on this disc that must die. Goodbye, Leshy. Goodbye, Magnificus. rest in peace.
The game begins to delete, and we fall in what looks to be Grimora's crypt, where we place various names into a headstone. Luke the Carter, P03, and Inscryption.exe. The headstone lowers, and we walk down a narrow hallway to find Grimora sitting at her own card table. She tells us,
"We may celebrate the end of my very long life, and of Inscryption too."
We begin to play a hand with her, and she tells us how the deletion of the game was necessary because deep within it was something truly evil. As we finish our battle, she calls Luke by name, saying how she dug through his PC's files and even noticed his searches on... Well, she doesn't finish the word, but it's safe to assume she's speaking of the Carnoffel code. She even tells Luke, "Be careful." As we go to start her boss battle, it's pirate-themed with fanfare and very loud music, but everything is deleted before we can even start. She bids us farewell, we shake her hand, and she is deleted. We then find ourselves back in Leshy's cabin, with the same deck from the first section. Things are very somber. He keeps telling us how he wishes he had more time. Eventually, the scales disappear, and he tells us there are things on this disc that are best not to be seen. The once almighty deity that we faced before is now pleading for just a few more rounds. At the very last moments of his life, his true colors shine. Eventually, the bell itself is deleted. Leshy tells us goodbye, and we shake his hand. Finally, we're with Magnificus. Making our way to him, we find Goobert's painting, and it looks like Magnificus blotted him out. How arrogant. He begs that Luke spare him, and to eject the disc, but he knows that he won't. He is too curious. As we begin our battle with him, he tells us how his goo mage was deleted, saying,
"And here I thought you two were becoming friends."
Battle becomes increasingly glitchy, and after what feels like a lifetime of battling, Magnificus begins to paint for us, and says,
"Do you not feel remorse, Luke? An entire world annihilated. Nothing beautiful can last."
He begins to panic, saying,
"No, I'm not ready to die yet."
We continue fighting until there's nothing left. Magnificus crawls towards us, speaking his final words.
"I must still shake your hand."
Before he can, he is deleted. We walk through the now empty world until we discover the wood carver.
There isn't much left. Inscryption is mostly gone. All that remains is the old data. It is recommended that you do not access it.
You will not heed the advice.
She is deleted, and we wander through the void until we find one last card. It's the old data. We begin to unpack it, and multiple images begin to flash out on our screen. But before we can make anything out, redacted bars begin to cover it. And we suddenly cut to a video of Luke, frantically smashing the floppy disk.
Yes, thank you so much for getting back to me.
No problem, Luke. If I understand you correctly, you've got some video footage that might expose some malpractice on the part of a game publisher, Game Funa.
Yes, that's right. Firstly, I have a game of theirs that took control of my PC for a bit, which can't be legal, and then this woman from the company came to my house, and she...
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just get my pen
I told you!
The same woman from earlier shot him point blank, and we see 2 packs of inscription cards floating in his own blood. The game fades into darkness, and there's no triumphant victory, no celebration. You, the player, are left in a void, staring at the remnants of a world that is no more. But even as the credits roll, you can't shake the feeling that the story isn't truly over. The mysteries of the old data, the strange corrupted files, the eerie meta-narrative, all of it lingers in your mind. You've played Inscryption, but has the game truly let you go? Or is there more hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? See, this isn't the end to one of the largest secrets ever seen in a video game. Scattered throughout the game are various mentions of something called the old data, and it is in fact the primary reason as to why Grimoire deleted everything, and likely why Luke was killed.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
So, clearly this old data is on the game somewhere, so maybe we need to check the actual game files? And, there's nothing there. It's all compiled Unity code and assets. Well, the only way to check the actual game files would be to load back into it. If we go back to the end of Act 1, where we load a new game, and we press Ctrl-C during this loading screen, we get access to the terminal. This has basically the same commands as a Windows terminal, like CD to open a directory and LS to list files, and if we type help, we get a list of even more commands, with one of them being decode. If we list the items on the root directory of this floppy drive, we see the old data, and this is a folder. Opening the old data folder, we see multiple image files which can't be opened via this terminal. The only file we can actually interact with is log.txt. Opening it gives us this long string of an encrypted mess, and if we try to decode it, it asks us for a cipher. A cipher is formally known as a method used to convert readable data into an unreadable form to keep it secure. The process of changing plain text into ciphertext is called encryption, and the reverse process is called decryption. This explains Inscryption's play on words with these concepts. Now, in order to find the true meaning behind the old data, we need to find ciphers that have been hidden throughout the game. The first clue is this strange note hidden within the corrupted footage from Act 3. Each one of these strings are separated by a line. My college is 12, perhaps, ? And blood letterbox. Individually, these are hints for various pieces of a complex cipher, which can be used to access the log.txt. If we look at the first hint, my college is 12, the only thing that could possibly be a cipher is that strange string of numbers from the card they gave us in Act 3. But plugging that into the decoder does nothing. However, if we use the number 12 from the note and use only the first 12 numbers from the string, we get the first part of our cipher. The second part is perhaps ? If we scroll through the list of assets in the credits, one of the Sketchfab links for a beeper is dead. Looking closely at the author's name, it is very familiar to that of a character from another Daniel Mullins game, The Hex. The Hex is the second major game released by Daniel, among his vast collection of critically acclaimed Game Jam entries. The game takes place in a secluded tavern called the 6 Pint Inn, where 6 video game characters from different genres are staying. One night, the innkeeper receives a phone call that a murder will occur, and you take on the role of each character, delving into their past to uncover their motivations and histories. Now, in Inscryption, there are several references to the Hex and Pony Island that are scattered throughout, but these aren't just references, they are in the same universe. The first reference is the strange green barking dog person seen in Act 2 and 3, and this is actually the character Rebecca from the Hex. And I won't go too deep into the explanation of the Hex yet, but just know she was the only one to survive at the end of the game. The next one is the final one is Lou Natas, or Louis Nathus. In the Hex, Lou Natas is shown to be the CEO of Game Funa, the same exact company that created Inscryption. And within the name itself, Lou Natas is believed to be a pseudo-anagram for Lucifer and Satan. Lu is shortened for Lucifer, and Nadas is Satan backwards. Using this string of numbers, which lines up perfectly with perhaps, this is our second string of numbers, giving almost everything for the cipher. The final hint is blood letterbox. We go back to Act 3 when we were speaking to the Bone Lord and set our resolution to a letterbox aspect ratio. When the screen goes blank, able to see for a brief second this code, which is actually leet speak for Bone Lord 666. Taking these three codes together, we're able to get out our final cipher, which gives us access to log.txt. Inside is what at first looks to be a journal, but upon closer investigation, it's more likely to be pieces of a conversation, which appears to be about someone named Barry Wilkinson being imprisoned and hunted for trying to smuggle a disc. Whoever is speaking here also has some sort of gripe with somebody named Mr. Kaminsky, who is coincidentally the name of a death card. There are also these strange codes jammed into the text, which for now seem kind of irrelevant. So whatever we're looking at certainly aren't the evil, deadly secrets that we were warned of. So how do we find that? Well, taking that long string of random letters and words, we get another list of clues. Most of it looks like random nonsense, except for the end part, which says Archive New Game. And this is actually 2 clues in one. If we go back to the Archivist fight, we can hear this beeping, which is actually Morse code for Big Ear, the nickname given to Barry Wilkinson in the log.txt. And New Game also refers to the New Game button found inside the crate in Act 3, as well as a box with a familiar rhythmic flashing. This translates to no chance, which when combined with the first part, gives us Big Ear, no chance. Working backwards, we look at the second clue, 2-3K2 floor. This clue can also be broken down into 2 parts. The first is 2-3K2, which has some similarities to something we've seen recently. Okay, it's similar, but those are pigs, not 2s. Well, in the Karnoffel game, the 2 is actually a pig, or Douse. And coincidentally, that's actually a card in the game. So what could 3 be? The only card that actually has a triple connotation is the Mantis God with his triple strike. And the K stands for King, or the Rat King. Playing these cards in Act 1 in the exact order, 2-3K2, does this. Which gives us stop as the first part of this clue. The second part, floor, is a bit more simple. On various floor textures scattered throughout the game are 5 numbers. If we arrange all the numbers in the chronological order of when we encountered said floors, we get the code 27341, giving us stop 27341. Our final clue is SE16. Yeah, not reading all that, which is actually a reference to a line of code in the save file for our game. If you scroll through the file and add 167 as an event and increase the number of events by 1, nothing changes. There's one other necessary part, which is to use this seemingly useless Bone Lord skull from Act 1. If you click it multiple times, its eyes will light up red, which activates our hint. Sitting down and getting back up from the table makes this happen.
What the fuck, man?
Giving us our final code. I am learned too much. If we now return to the console with our new cipher, we get another bit of text, which this time is in Polish. Translating to English, we get this. But that's for later. Trust me, reading it now would just confuse everyone. The next cipher is quite a trip. Arranging the inserted text from this entry gives us this. The first hint being back to beginning, and this is where we finally come full circle with sacrifices must be made. If we place a file named cipher.cipher with the cipher code placed inside of the game files, we get this line of text at the ending of the game, giving us another piece of the cipher. Take a shot every time I say cipher. The next clue is straight up manatee. And this is actually a reference to a card from a custom Smash Up. Oh wait, what's Smash Up? Okay, so Smash Up is a shuffle building game where you choose factions such as pirates, ninjas, robots, and more. Reading this directly from the website. And apparently, Daniel Mullins, the creator of the game, created his own custom faction all the way back in 2017. and one of the cards from his custom faction is Manatee Anthony, which gives us the next code. The final clue ties into the fourth other Daniel Mullins game thus far, Catch Monsters. In Act 1, we actually saw footage of Luke opening up a Catch Monsters pack, which was actually a failed Kickstarter from Daniel himself. And as you may have guessed, Birchkin is a character from said game, whose special ability is pacifism. But there is still this last bit at the end, 56-57M, and this ties back into yet another Mullins game, Beneath the Surface. If we do the same thing we did for Sacrifices Must Be Made, but this time use Cipher 1, we can actually send our hook down between 56 and 57 meters, giving us this strange disc. Looking at the description for this item, we can see that some of the letters are replaced with numbers, and if we extract those, we get 0044 exclamation 3, our final code. Taking these all together, we get this log, and more importantly, the precious deck of cards in his jacket pocket. The content of this log won't make complete sense until we take a look at the link inside of this log. Going to the link now just shows us a page with a Kaminsky Data Storage logo, and a header reading, "Orders is full. Seriously, what is wrong with you? Please await packages and mail if ordered." But if we were to take a look at this page right as Inscryption was released, we would see this. The English here is slightly broken, but there's a field for the product issue, a promo code, and an address. Lots of people filled this out when it was discovered, until shortly after, it was changed into what we see today. And then everything went silent. There were these 3 cryptic logs, a dead-end website, and that was it. Until one day, a user named Uwawa Smite,
hello there,
who was one of the first people to sign up on the Kaminsky Data website, received a strange letter in the mail. The label read Kaminsky Data Storage, and inside was a black floppy disk with the same label. Loading the floppy disk, there was only one file, backup2.txt, with this cryptic yet familiar text. It seems to be formatted in the same way as the other ciphers, but this was just one part. Considering the name of the file, all they could do is wait. And wait they did. Within the span of a couple of days, 2 other participants received floppies in the same format, and combining them all together gave us this. Thank you for playing Inscryption, friend. The end. Taking this cipher, we enter it into the terminal, giving a final log, this time in Russian. Combining and translating all the logs, we get a complete conversation. There are 4 people involved. Person A, Barry Wilkinson, Person B, Kaminsky, Person C, Casey Hobbs, and Person X, who is unknown. The conversation revolves around the alleged location of Hitler's corpse and something called the Karnathal Code, which is apparently hidden in the specific order of cards found in Hitler's jacket pocket. If we go back to Act 2, we can see the Bone Lord with a strange deck of cards and his jacket pocket, which has led many to theorize that the Bone Lord is the digital reincarnation of Hitler. Now, remember earlier when I said, now we'll come back to this later, as context is really needed for any of this to make sense. Now, we have the necessary context. The first card we get is the Fool, with a picture of an ear. The trader even directly states that this is a reference to Barry, aka Barry Wilkinson, you know, big ear, and they say that he was, quote, put to the gun. The next card is the Empress, which states that Casey helped create Inscryption, and that she discovered much of the old data. Following that is Death, with art that looks eerily similar to the Bone Lord. Even the same deck of cards is in his pocket. The Trapper tells us that his evil corrupts the cards, and all of us, and that he created the code, the Karnathal Code. For the Death card, the Trapper says the code is in the cards. This is the same bit of information that is shared in the log. And finally, the Tower card, which references a triangle-shaped building, attributing it as part of the nature of Inscryption's creation. The Trapper also mentions someone called the Blue Man, another character from the Hex, who is known as Irving. Irving is the AI assistant for a piece of software called GameWorks. In the Hex, Irving had nearly complete control over the characters' roles, and even their entire lives. And coincidentally, GameWorks is owned by Game Funa. If Game Funa used GameWorks to create Inscryption, it's entirely possible that the Blue Man was somehow involved. So, with all of this information collected, we can begin to piece together the whole story. Sometime during Hitler's reign, he created something called the Karnaffel Code, a supernatural algorithm that somehow brought these 4 scribes, and possibly other creatures, to life. After Hitler died at the end of World War II, the Soviets took his corpse and buried it at a drop-off spot, given this line from the log.txt. Barry Wilkinson, who can be identified as an agent for the Department of Defense from the ID card we found in Act 2, was sent to the USSR to retrieve the Karnaffel Code. He dug up Hitler's corpse and decrypted the code and placed the information onto a floppy disk. He then packed the disk into a box of random blanks to ship back to the United States. A desperate attempt to smuggle it, which somehow worked. Eventually, this disk made it into the hands of Game Funa, who buried the data deep within their game, Inscryption. The 2D section of the game, or Act 2, was what Game Funa actually created. Everything we saw in Act 3 was the result of the Karnaffel Code being buried within the game. Casey was a developer for Inscryption, who did a bit too much digging. After beating the main game, there is this red skull at the main menu, which gives us access to Casey's mod, an endless version of the first act full of exciting new challenges. But there's more than that. After beating each of the respective challenges, we receive a devlog, and after beating every challenge, we have a total of 12. She begins writing about how characters seem to show strange behavior, almost having a mind of their own. First saying how the angler fished something up with his hook and walked away. Eventually, she says how Leshy went, quote, 3D. And at this point, she begins to doubt her own sanity. This is followed by her saying that a Mr. Kaminsky said the game was a cover, clearly for the old data. And after enough digging, Casey discovered that the Karnaffel Code is used to activate a doomsday device hidden under Berlin. After that, her entries become more and more unhinged, until she finally says, "I'm done with all of this. I've got a little wooden box I'm gonna bury with the disc inside. I'm writing down the chords, and who knows? Maybe I'll burn them later. Leshy will thank me." After she wrote down the coordinates on a pack of inscription cards and buried the disc, she was killed in a fire at a computer storage facility, likely Kaminsky's. This happened in 1992, and over 20 years later, Casey's mother decided to sell off some of her old things. And this is when, coincidentally, Luke purchased 2 packs of her cards. And after he began digging the same way Casey was, Game Funa, or whatever entity that controls them, offed Luke just as swiftly as they did Casey. P03 had a grand plan to share the game, subsequently the old data, to the world through Luke's PC. But Gromora deleted everything before that could happen, and Luke even smashed the disc right before he died. Even after all this, there's still something we haven't solved. Alongside the cipher on the 3 floppy disks was this strange code, a seemingly random assortment of letters and numbers, unlike any of the ciphers we've seen so far. But there is one unique thing about it. It's 11 characters long, and so are YouTube video IDs. Plugging this string into YouTube, we find this unlisted video from the channel Kaminsky MFG. Is that